Have you ever wondered what secrets still echo through the world's ancient stones? Welcome to Unearthed Secrets, where ruins remember and lost civilizations speak through wind and dust. From the Colosseum's roar to Stonehenge's quiet gaze, every monument whispers across time. Before we begin, like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there. The Colosseum. In the center of Rome, where modern streets now hum with scooters and the scent of espresso drifts through the air, an ancient shadow still stretches across time. The Colosseum. It rises like a broken crown of stone, its arches open to the sky, its silence vast and knowing. But 2,000 years ago, there was nothing silent about this place. It was alive, a living heart of the Roman Empire, pulsing with noise, blood, and glory. The Colosseum was born from both ambition and guilt. After the fall of Emperor Nero, whose golden palace had consumed the heart of Rome, the new ruler, Emperor Vespasian, sought to give back to the people what Nero had stolen: space, pride, and spectacle. He drained Nero's private lake, and in its place began construction on the most magnificent amphitheater the world had ever seen. It would be a gift to the citizens of Rome, one that would remind them of their emperor's generosity and of their empire's unmatched power. The labor was brutal and relentless. Tens of thousands of enslaved people, including many Jewish captives brought from the Judean wars, hauled stone from Tivoli's quarries. Their sweat darkened the dust that clung to the scaffolding as the elliptical shape of the arena took form. Columns of travertine stacked upon one another, each cut and fitted without mortar, held in place by iron clamps. Inside, tiers of seats rose in sweeping arcs, their precision unmatched. By 80 CE, under Emperor Titus, the Colosseum was complete, a massive ellipse nearly 200 feet tall, capable of holding more than 50,000 spectators. When it opened, it did so with a celebration that lasted for 100 days. Imagine it, the sound of horns echoing across marble plazas, banners snapping in the wind, the smell of roasted meat and incense thick in the air. From every corner of the empire, people flocked to see the wonder of Rome. Senators in white togas found their shaded seats closest to the arena floor, while the common people filled the upper levels, their voices merging into a single roar. The emperor himself sat in the imperial box, a symbol of divine authority, his presence enough to make the crowd bow in silent awe before erupting in cheers. At the signal, the games began. The arena sand, called Harena, gleamed golden under the sun, soon to be darkened by what was to come. From below, through hidden lifts and trapdoors, beasts rose into the light: lions from North Africa, tigers from Persia, bears from the Alps. Each creature had traveled farther than most Romans ever would. The people gasped as hunters, called bestiari, stepped forward to fight them. The clash was both brutal and mesmerizing, a deadly dance between man and beast. When the animal fell, its death was greeted not with sorrow, but with applause. Rome was a civilization that found beauty in control, even of nature itself. Later came the executions. Condemned prisoners, paraded as characters from mythology, were forced to reenact famous tales of divine punishment. Some were torn apart by animals, others burned or crushed. To the crowd it was theater, morality dressed in cruelty. To the condemned it was the empire's final lesson, that Rome's order was absolute. And then at last came the main event, the gladiators. They were the empire's most paradoxical figures, slaves who became celebrities, killers who became idols. Some fought for freedom, others for fame. They trained in barracks called ludi, their lives reduced to a cycle of discipline and danger. Yet when they stepped into the arena, they became something larger than life. They were the empire's reflection, its strength, its hunger, its pride. The crowd adored them, chanted their names, and placed wagers on their survival. Beneath the sand, the hypogeum, a labyrinth of tunnels and machinery buzzed with unseen movement. Slaves hauled cages, winches creaked, and the air below reeked of blood, sweat, and rust. The Colosseum was not merely a stage for violence, it was an engine of illusion. Engineers could flood the arena for mock naval battles, transforming sand into sea. Painted backdrops rose and fell like curtains. Exotic animals emerged as though conjured by magic. Every detail, from the release of a lion to the fall of a gladiator, was choreographed for the emperor's glory. To the citizens of Rome, it was not horror, it was order. Bred in circuses, as the poet Juvenal would later write. Feed the people, entertain them, and they will not question their chains. But for all its grandeur, the Colosseum was also a place of ghosts. Beneath the cheers, there were cries of the enslaved who built it, of the fighters who died within it, of the creatures dragged from distant lands only to perish for sport. The arena was both Rome's pride and its sin. Even in victory, it whispered of mortality. As evening descended over the city, torches flickered in the stands, casting long shadows across the stone. The games would continue until the stars rose high, and when they ended, the crowds would spill into the streets, drunk, loud, and triumphant. The emperor would smile, knowing he had secured their devotion for another day. The city would sleep, but the Colosseum never truly rested. Deep below, workers cleaned the sand, washed the blood, and prepared for tomorrow's show. It was a cycle that defined Rome itself. Glory built upon ruin, spectacle upon suffering, all in the name of the empire. Yet in the Colosseum's arches there was something eternal, a geometry of power and perfection that even time could not fully erode. The people might forget the names of those who fought or died, but the structure endured, its shadow stretching across generations. In the next part, we'll descend deeper into the labyrinth beneath the arena, where the machinery of illusion lived, and where the echoes of Rome's greatest performances still linger. There, in the dark corridors below the sand, we'll find not just history, but the soul of a civilization that refused to look away from its own reflection. As dawn poured through the broken arches of the Colosseum, the sunlight touched the same stones that once echoed with the roars of 50,000 voices. The crowd had long since gone silent, yet the air seemed to remember them, the rise and fall of cheers, the slow intake of breath before a sword struck. In the quiet morning, Rome's grand amphitheater felt both alive and hollow, like the ribs of a sleeping beast. Beneath the arena floor, in the dim chambers of the hypogeum, shadows still lingered. Stone corridors, where wild animals once waited in iron cages, stretched endlessly beneath the earth. The scent of damp limestone and ancient rust clung to the walls, and narrow shafts above once carried light, or perhaps mercy, to those below. When you close your eyes, you can almost hear the clatter of pulleys, the creak of hidden trapdoors rising, and the brief gasp before a lion saw daylight for the first time. Gladiators, chained or free, trained here in these very halls. Some came willingly, chasing fame and gold. Others were prisoners of war, thieves or slaves, condemned but given one last chance to be remembered. A few earned freedom after years of blood and thunder, their names whispered in taverns long after they were gone. Even so, most met their end beneath the emperor's gaze, beneath the scorching sun and the weight of Rome's applause. When the games began, the Colosseum transformed. Dust rose like incense, banners rippled in the wind, and the emperor sat beneath a great awning, his gesture deciding life or death. The roar of beasts, the clash of shields, the thunder of the crowd, it was a symphony of spectacle and suffering. Every strike and every fall fed Rome's hunger for entertainment. And yet, even the mightiest gladiator fought against more than his opponent. He fought against the empire's gaze, against the inevitability of being forgotten. As centuries passed, the cheers faded, earthquakes cracked its walls, stones were stolen to build palaces and cathedrals, and ivy crept across its arches like time reclaiming its debt. By the Middle Ages, people said spirits wandered its corridors at night, the restless echoes of the fallen. The arena became a quarry, then a ruin, then a symbol. Yet through it all, it endured. Today, tourists walk where emperors once stood. They lean on the ancient railings, unaware that beneath their feet lie layers of hidden stories, victories, betrayals, silent prayers before the final blow. At sunset, when the light turns golden and the Colosseum glows from within, you might still feel a pulse, faint but steady, as if the stones themselves are remembering. No monument of Rome speaks so clearly about what it meant to be powerful, or to be powerless. The Colosseum is not merely a ruin, it's a mirror, reflecting both the glory that built it and the shadows it can never escape. And when night falls over Rome, and the wind slips through its hollow arches, the old amphitheater whispers again, not of violence or victory, but of endurance. Of the strange, unbreakable will of stone to outlast every empire that ever thought itself eternal. The Library of Alexandria. There are places in history where the world seemed to hold its breath, where the air itself shimmered with the weight of discovery, the scent of ink, papyrus, and ambition. Among them all, none burned brighter or vanished more completely than the Library of Alexandria. They called it the mind of the ancient world, a sanctuary of scrolls and scholars, born from one empire's dream of knowing everything that could be known. Its walls once shimmered white in the Egyptian sun, overlooking the blue of the Mediterranean, and its corridors hummed with the murmur of languages from every shore: Greek, Egyptian, Persian, Phoenician, Sanskrit. Inside, knowledge flowed like a river without end. It began with a single vision. Ptolemy I Soter, one of Alexander the Great's generals, imagined a city that would become a beacon of learning. He inherited Egypt after Alexander's death, but he hungered for something greater than conquest. He wanted to gather the entire world between two walls, its ideas, its discoveries, its truths. So he summoned scholars, mathematicians, historians, and poets from across the known world, promising them gold, housing, and eternal honor. And thus, the Library of Alexandria began to rise beside the sea. The Great Library was not just a building, it was an ecosystem of intellect. Attached to the Mausoleum, the Temple of the Muses, it became a home to thinkers who dined, studied, debated, and sometimes disagreed under its marble colonnades. Its scriptoria copied manuscripts by hand, filling shelf after shelf with fragile scrolls of papyrus, stored in orderly niches. Estimates vary wildly, but ancient accounts claimed it held between 400,000 and 700,000 scrolls, a staggering concentration of the ancient world's wisdom. They said ships entering the Great Harbor were searched by officials. Any book, scroll, or parchment found aboard was confiscated, not to be stolen, but to be copied. The original was carefully stored in the library, and a duplicate was returned to the ship's owner. Even the smallest fragment of text was precious, because every word, every line, could change the way humans understood the world. Imagine walking those echoing halls at dusk, the scent of oil lamps and salt air, the rustle of parchment and whispered debates in Greek and Egyptian. Here, Euclid refined the principles of geometry. Here, Eratosthenes measured the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy, using nothing more than shadows and logic. Here, the astronomer Hipparchus mapped the heavens, and Callimachus catalogued every scroll in a system that predated our libraries by 2 millennia. The scholars of Alexandria sought more than facts, they sought harmony between reason and mystery. They pondered the stars, dissected language, studied anatomy, and recorded myths as carefully as mathematics. Philosophy was not distant from science, poetry was not apart from logic. To them, everything, from the motion of planets to the rhythm of verse, was part of one vast, divine pattern. At night, the harbor flickered with lanterns reflecting on the waves, and across the causeway stood the Pharos, the great lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It was said that from its tower, one could glimpse the library's domed roof glowing faintly beneath the moon. 2 miracles of light, one guiding sailors to safe harbor, the other guiding minds toward truth. But even within its brilliance, shadows gathered. Knowledge is power, and power attracts envy, suspicion, and fear. Philosophers whispered of tension between scholars and priests, between Greek rulers and native Egyptians, between learning and belief. The library, in its pursuit of truth, sometimes challenged the very foundations of the world that sustained it. And then, there was the fire. Not one, perhaps, but many. The first blaze, they say, came when Julius Caesar's troops set fire to ships in Alexandria's harbor during the Civil War of 48 BCE. The flames spread to the docks, and from there to the warehouses and beyond, until they touched the library itself. Scrolls that had survived centuries of labor and love turned to smoke in hours. And yet, not all was lost. There were whispers that copies survived, hidden in subsidiary libraries, the Serapeum, or in private collections. For centuries afterward, scholars spoke of fragments rescued from the ashes, remnants of the knowledge that once lit the world. Even in ruin, the library became legend, a symbol of both human brilliance and fragility, the eternal tension between creation and destruction. Some say it never truly died, that its spirit traveled from Alexandria to Baghdad's House of Wisdom, to the monasteries of Ireland, to every quiet shelf where someone reads and wonders. For knowledge cannot be burned entirely, it lingers, even in the ashes. And in Alexandria, where the sea still whispers against ancient stones, some believe the library's dream endures, waiting, like an ember beneath the dust, for someone to find it again. Long after the first flames faded, and the ashes cooled, Alexandria refused to forget. The sea still sighed against the marble stones, and somewhere beneath the ruins, among columns blackened by smoke, the idea of the library continued to breathe. The destruction of the great library was not a single tragedy but a series of slow, echoing collapses, each century dimming its light a little further, until the memory of its brilliance became more myth than fact. The first fire during Julius Caesar's campaign may have charred thousands of scrolls, but not the dream itself. For decades after, scholars still walked the colonnades of the Mausoleum, the temple of the Muses that once pulsed with life beside the palace quarter. In its shadow, a smaller but defiant sister collection, the Library of the Serapeum, survived. It stood near the great temple of Serapis, that strange fusion of Greek and Egyptian divinity, where learning and faith coexisted uneasily beneath tall stone gods. Here priests and philosophers preserved what they could. They recopied texts by hand, mathematical treatises, plays, and philosophical works rescued from the ruins. They whispered that though the original library had fallen, its soul lived on within those sacred halls. For centuries, the Serapeum kept the torch alive. Students still came from Greece, Syria, India, and beyond to study astronomy, geometry, medicine, and the philosophy of the ancients. The scholars of Alexandria carried a fierce pride. They were the last heirs of a lineage that reached back to Aristotle himself. But the world around them was changing. New empires rose, new faiths flourished, and Alexandria, once the intellectual navel of the world, found itself caught between gods and emperors. In 391 CE, that fragile balance shattered. By then, the Roman Empire had turned to Christianity, and the old temples of Egypt had become symbols of pagan defiance. The Serapeum was stormed by zealots, its statues smashed, its scrolls scattered to the wind. Witnesses wrote that the halls that had once echoed with debate, now filled with the sound of burning papyrus, brittle, ancient, curling into smoke. With that, the last visible remnant of the Library of Alexandria was extinguished. Yet even that was not the end. Because knowledge, once written, rarely dies cleanly. It fragments, drifts, and resurfaces where least expected, and the story of the library became less about what was lost, and more about what might have survived. Some claim that many of its scrolls were smuggled east long before the fires, carried to Athens, to Pergamon, to the archives of Babylon. Others believe that fragments found refuge in the libraries of Constantinople or in the hidden chambers beneath the desert monasteries of Egypt. In these whispers lies one of history's greatest mysteries, that the library's knowledge may still exist, buried in forgotten rooms or misidentified as simple fragments of papyrus in private collections and museum vaults. Even today, archaeologists continue to dig beneath Alexandria's modern streets, uncovering hints of marble floors, columns, and tunnels that once belonged to the Palace District, the very quarter where the great library stood. Underwater excavations along the ancient harbor reveal submerged ruins, corridors now home to fish and coral that might once have held the minds of nations. Some divers have claimed to find shattered amphorae and burnt papyrus sealed in stone jars, preserved by silt and saltwater for millennia. None have yet been verified, but each discovery renews the same question. Could fragments of the library still lie waiting below? The mystery deepens when one considers the writings that came after. In the 9th century, Baghdad's House of Wisdom rose under the Abbasid caliphs, a monumental center of learning that mirrored Alexandria's ambition. There, scholars translated Greek works on science, philosophy, and mathematics, many of which might trace their lineage directly to scrolls saved from the library's ruin. It's as if the spirit of Alexandria drifted eastward, reborn under a different sun, wearing new languages and names. The library's influence stretched further still. Without it, Euclid's geometry might have vanished. Without it, the works of Aristarchus, who suggested that the Earth moved around the Sun long before Copernicus, might have been lost completely. Without it, the ancient medical treatises of Herophilus and Erasistratus, who studied the human brain and circulatory system centuries before modern science, might never have survived in any form. And yet, hints of all these works reappear later in fragments and copies, evidence that the great library's wisdom never truly perished, only scattered. Still, there remains the haunting question, what did we lose forever? Historians estimate that up to half of the ancient world's written knowledge may have vanished in those fires. Entire plays of Sophocles, entire histories by early chroniclers of Egypt, whole treatises on lost technologies, vanished languages, and forgotten gods. We have titles and names, works like The Histories of Berossus, The Mechanical Inventions of Catsibolus, The Lost Epics of Homeric Heroes, but their pages are gone. Even Aristotle's second book on politics, said to contain thoughts far ahead of his time, disappeared without a trace. It's as if civilization itself forgot half its own memory. There are even darker legends, tales that the library housed forbidden knowledge, texts of alchemy, prophecy, and celestial magic collected from distant lands. Some ancient writers hinted that it contained scrolls describing the secrets of the pyramids, the lost continent of Atlantis, or star maps given by visitors from beyond the sphere. To believers in these myths, the library's destruction was not an accident, but an act of deliberate concealment, humanity burning its own truth to protect itself from what it was not ready to know. While historians dismiss such claims, the allure persists. Every mystery too vast to explain finds a home in Alexandria's ashes. And then there are the quieter theories that the library was never entirely destroyed at all. Some modern researchers suspect that its contents were gradually moved during political turmoil, hidden in sealed vaults beneath the Serapeum or the royal quarter. Satellite scans of Alexandria's underground layers reveal massive uncharted chambers buried deep beneath the city, structures far older than the current streets. No one knows what lies inside them. Egypt has forbidden excavation beneath certain protected zones, fearing damage to the fragile remains. And so the mystery lingers. What if the world's greatest library still sleeps, perfectly preserved in the dark? But perhaps the true legacy of the Library of Alexandria is not in what was lost, but in what it inspired. Every modern university, every archive and library, from the Bodleian to the Bibliothèque Nationale to the Library of Congress, is its descendant. The very act of preserving and sharing knowledge, of cataloging, translating, and debating across cultures, was born in Alexandria's shadow. When a student opens a book, when a scientist records an experiment, when a philosopher questions the nature of truth, they are, unknowingly, continuing the library's mission. And yet, there is something profoundly human in its fate. The library reminds us that knowledge is both fragile and eternal, that what we build can burn, but what we imagine cannot. Its ruins may be silent, but the dream it embodied, the dream that all wisdom could coexist without borders or fear, endures. If you visit Alexandria today and stand by the sea near the site where the ancient harbor once glittered, you can see a new structure, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina. Opened in 2002, it curves like a rising sun beside the Mediterranean, its walls carved with scripts from every known language. It is not a reconstruction, but a resurrection. Inside are millions of volumes, digital archives, and research centers dedicated to the pursuit of human understanding, and in its silence, you can almost hear an echo, faint but enduring, of the ancient voices that once filled the great library, the scratching of styluses on papyrus, the hum of languages blending into one. The eternal murmur of curiosity itself. For as long as there are questions, the Library of Alexandria will never truly be gone. It will remain, not in brick or scroll, but in the human mind, forever hungry, forever searching, and perhaps, somewhere beneath the waves of Egypt's northern coast, the last embers of that ancient light still glow, waiting for the day when we are ready to find them again. Callanish Stones. In the far reaches of Scotland's Outer Hebrides, where the sea rolls endlessly against rocky shores and the wind seems to speak in tongues, stands a circle of ancient stones older than legend itself. The Callanish stones rise like sentinels against the horizon, dark silhouettes etched in gray against a landscape painted by mist and time. Before the first rays of sunlight touch the hills, these stones have already waited, perhaps for dawn, perhaps for something more eternal. To walk among them is to step into an ancient breath still lingering in the air. No one truly knows who raised them or why. The stones predate the pyramids, older even than the written word, and yet they remain as precise as if a silent hand once drew them across the moor to mirror the heavens above. Archaeologists say they were built around 5,000 years ago, aligned with the movements of the sun and moon, a celestial clock made of earth and endurance, but others, poets, wanderers and dreamers, believe the stones were more than a calendar. They were a meeting place of worlds, a bridge between the living and the dead, or perhaps between humanity and the stars. When the wind moves through Callanish, it seems to find a voice again. The sound is deep and mournful, threading through the tall standing stones like a song too ancient to remember. Lichens cover their faces, soft green veils hiding the centuries of rain that have washed over them. Yet despite their stillness, there is a tension in the air, a pulse. Each stone seems to lean just slightly inward, as if listening, as if aware. The people who built them, the Neolithic farmers of the Hebrides, must have known the land's rhythm intimately. They raised the stones on a low ridge of Lewis Island, facing the path of the midsummer sunrise and the midwinter moon. Twice a year, the light aligns perfectly, striking through the heart of the circle as dawn breaks over the Atlantic. It is said that those who stand within the circle on that morning can feel the world pause just for a breath as the sun climbs over the edge of the sea. Long before the name Callanish existed, this site may have been a place of ritual and reverence. Beneath the stones, archaeologists have found traces of cremated bones, shards of pottery, and the faint lines of a wooden structure that came before the stones themselves. Whatever ceremony took place here, it was not of quick gestures or fleeting offerings. It was deliberate, immense, shaped by generations who watched the same sun rise and fall, watched the stars trace their patient arcs across the northern sky. To them, the heavens were not distant, they were part of the soil, the harvest, the tides. To mark the heavens in stone was to claim some understanding of time itself, to anchor eternity into the earth. But Callanish was not built all at once. It grew, slowly, over centuries. The first stones may have been part of a single line, stretching toward the sunrise. Later others joined them, forming avenues, wings, and a central circle. Some stones are nearly 4 meters tall, weathered but unbroken. In their placement, one can sense geometry, not random chance. The builders mapped the horizon, studied where the moon dipped and where the sun lingered longest, and set their markers like a dialogue between earth and sky. The pattern they left behind still confounds modern astronomers. It's too precise for coincidence, too complex for mere ritual. It whispers of a lost understanding of astronomy, one not measured by instruments but by lifetimes. Legends grew from the stones, as they always do when memory fades. One tale tells of giants who refused to convert to Christianity, turned to stone as punishment for their defiance. Another speaks of a priest who raised the stones to capture a god's shadow. Locals still call them the stones of the moon, believing they mark a place where divine light once touched the earth. Even today, during midsummer, people gather at Callanish to watch the sun rise between the stones, to feel, if only for a heartbeat, that they too are part of something ancient and cyclical. As dawn approaches, the moor turns silver blue, and the stones seem to shimmer with it. The air cools, the ground wet beneath one's feet, the scent of peat thicken the mist. Birds stir, and the first thread of gold creeps over the hills. It touches the tallest stone first, then the next, then another, until the whole circle glows faintly in the early light. For a moment it feels as though the stones are waking alive with the same quiet expectancy they've known for 5 millennia. The world turns, but they do not. They are the watchers, the keepers of dawn. The people who built them are gone. Their villages are dust, their names erased, their stories scattered on the wind. Yet here the stones remain, heavy with meaning, with patience, with silence. Some say they guard the memory of an age when humans still spoke to the cosmos, when every rising sun was a promise renewed. Others believe they are markers left by visitors not of this world, beings who understood the universe in ways we cannot. The truth, as always, may rest somewhere between faith and geology. By the time full morning light breaks, the moor is washed in gold, and the stones no longer look gray, but alive, etched with shades of ochre and bronze. From a distance they seem to form a shape, almost a figure with outstretched arms, waiting for the sky. It's easy to believe that these stones are not ruins but messages, letters written in granite to an audience that has yet to arrive. Even now, when the night falls and the stars return, Callanish holds its breath again. The moon rises, tracing the same path it has since before history began. And though centuries pass unnoticed, the stones remain where they've always been, facing east, waiting for the dawn to come again. The night deepens over the Hebridean Isle, and the wind whispers through the long grass that sways around the standing stones. Each tall, weathered monolith glows faintly beneath the low silver of the moon, its shadow bending across the uneven ground like an arm stretched toward the sea. The village beyond sleeps in silence, their hearths dimmed, their dreams wandering into realms far older than words. Yet here, upon the rise where the Callanish stones stand in perfect solemnity, something ancient seems to breathe. The stones have watched more dawns than memory allows. They have seen ice creep and retreat, have heard the crash of Viking sails, and felt the tremor of thunder that rolled over lost centuries. No one knows who set them here. No name, no chisel-marked boast remains. Only their patient geometry endures. 13 in a ring, one great stone at the center, and others stretching outward in lines that meet the horizon. As the world darkens further, clouds drift apart, revealing the stars in their slow dance. The stones stand in quiet conversation with them. The Milky Way arches above, matching the long avenue of pillars leading to the circle, as if earth and sky are mirrors, reflecting one another in an unspoken accord. And somewhere in that symmetry lies the secret of Callanish. For thousands of years, islanders have tried to understand what the stones mean. Some say they were a calendar of the heavens, placed to mark the rising of midsummer's sun, when light slips perfectly through the northern avenue and touches the heart of the circle. Others whisper that they are frozen beings, giants turned to stone for forgetting the sacred. There are tales that beneath them, in hollows and chambers lost to time, the ancestors rest, keeping the island safe from storms. Yet even those who live close by will tell you there's something strange about the air around Callanish. On certain nights, the calm ones before the solstice, when mist drifts low, people speak of feeling watched, not by ghosts but by the stones themselves. The hairs rise on the neck, and the wind seems to pause, as though listening. And if one stands long enough, facing the great central pillar, it almost seems to pulse faintly, lit from within by the reflection of 1,000 forgotten dawns. The second part of Callanish's mystery is not its creation, but its persistence. Time has no mercy for wood, nor for men, yet these stones endure through storm and salt and centuries of silence. They are made of Louisian gneiss, among the oldest rocks on Earth, born before life itself took breath. Their builders might have chosen them for this reason, to bind something eternal into the land. To remind those who came after that stone, unlike memory, does not fade. Archaeologists who dug beneath the circle found traces of fire and ash, ritual burnings perhaps, or offerings cast to the heavens, animal bones, tools of quartz, fragments of pottery shaped by hand. None of them told the full story. The tools were too few, the patterns too deliberate to be mere graves. It seemed rather a place of alignment, where human time met cosmic order. A place where the sun, moon, and stars could be summoned into perfect symmetry. When the moon rises low and full, it traces an arc that only appears once every 19 years. It dips near the southern horizon, and if the night is clear, slides perfectly along the line of stones before vanishing into the hills beyond Loch Roag. Ancient eyes must have watched that silver descent in wonder, marking the cycles of a world so vast it defied speech. For them, Callanish may have been a living instrument, a clock of stone and shadow, tuned to the breath of the cosmos. But there is another layer still, something less tangible, more spiritual. For many locals, Callanish is not a ruin, but a threshold. To step inside the circle is to step into an older rhythm. The air feels denser there, as if the world beyond has slowed to let this place remain untouched. Visitors often describe a strange quiet, as though all sound fades except the faint murmur of wind through grass. It's not silence exactly, but a kind of stillness that feels aware, almost sentient. At dawn, the horizon begins to brighten behind the stones. The first light touches the tallest monolith, then glides slowly down its rough face. The granite blushes pink, then gold. Shadows shrink, revealing the pattern of the circle once more, the cross-like shape the stones form when seen from above. This alignment has led many to wonder if it was a symbol, a kind of map pointing towards something long lost, or perhaps a representation of balance between earth and sky, life and death, light and dark. When the modern world awoke to Callanish again in the 19th century, the site was buried in peat. Centuries of rain and moss had hidden the stones up to their necks. Locals had long known they were there, but few ventured close. It wasn't until excavations began that their full majesty was revealed again, a complete circle, precise and ancient, emerging like a secret reborn from the earth. One can imagine what that first clearing must have felt like, to peel back the layers of centuries and find a circle that predates written history. To see where human hands once touched stone and lifted it into alignment with the stars. The workers, hardened by wind and toil, must have stood silent for a moment, realizing they were disturbing something sacred. Some say the air turned still that day, that birds stopped their flight above the moor. Today tourists arrive by the hundreds, their footsteps soft on the damp grass. But when dusk falls and the last buses leave, the stones reclaim their solitude. The wind resumes its chant, and the sky slowly fills with constellations. It is then, in the hush between night and morning, that one can almost hear the echo of what was, the murmur of priests or astronomers, the low hum of ancient voices counting the stars. What makes Callanish so compelling is not merely its age, but its endurance as a bridge between what is known and what can only be felt. The stones do not answer questions, they invite them. They hold their mystery the way the sea holds its depth, calmly, infinitely. And in their stillness, they remind us of a truth our ancestors may have known better than we do now, that to wait for dawn is an act of faith. The wind rises again, tugging softly at the grass, and a pale light spreads across the moor. The first sunbeam of midsummer slides through the avenue, illuminating the center of the circle with quiet precision. The air seems to shimmer, and for one heartbeat, before the day begins, it feels as if the stones are breathing with the sky. Then, as always, the moment passes. The world brightens, the ancient circle stands silent once more, watching, waiting, as it has for 5,000 years. Still waiting for dawn. Stonehenge. Have you ever stood before something so old, so silent, that you could almost feel the hum of centuries passing through the stone? There, on the wide plains of Salisbury, beneath skies that have watched every age come and go, stands the circle that never slept. Stonehenge, a name whispered in awe and uncertainty, a monument that outlasted its builders, its purpose swallowed by time. Tonight, we walk slowly into its shadow, where history breathes in the quiet wind and mystery lingers like the scent of rain on grass. The dawn always begins here with a hush. Mist curls across the Salisbury plain, veiling the stones in a pale silver breath. Sheep graze in the distance, their shapes blurred and ghostly. The air feels heavier here, charged, as if the earth beneath your feet remembers. You can hear it, the faint, almost inaudible whisper of wind passing through the gaps in those massive sarsens. It's a low hum, a note too ancient to be named, a sound that seems to echo from beneath the soil itself. Long before roads and empire, before written words or measured calendars, people came here, not to live but to stand, to look, to build something that would outlast them all. The great stones of Stonehenge were raised over 4,000 years ago, yet even now, no one can say with certainty why. Each generation of archaeologists adds a new thread, and yet the tapestry remains incomplete. The circle that never slept, that's what the locals might have called it, if legends had kept the old tongue alive. Because even in the dead of night, Stonehenge does not rest. It holds the stars in its frame, aligns itself to the solstice sun, and listens, patiently, for footsteps that no longer come. If you look closely, you can see the weight of millennia etched across the stone faces. Lichen blooms like old scars. Rainwater has carved tiny rivers down the sides of the great trilithons. The ground beneath them hums faintly with the pulse of the earth. These stones, some weighing over 25 tons, were hauled from miles away, from Marlborough Downs, and even farther still, from the Preslet Hills of Wales. That's nearly 180 miles, through forests, rivers, and marshland. No wheels, no beasts of burden as we know them, only human will, determination, and belief. It's easy to imagine the builders, thousands of years ago, wrapped in animal hides, their breath white in the cold dawn. They worked in rhythm, pulling ropes, laying rollers, lifting, chanting perhaps. The sound of wooden sledges groaning under weight, the slap of mud, and the smell of wet earth, and all around, the moor stretched endless and open, a canvas of silence. Stonehenge was not built in a day, or a decade, or even a lifetime. Generations came and went, adding, adjusting, replacing. The oldest stones date back to around 3000 BCE, when the site was little more than a circular ditch and bank. Then came the bluest stones, smaller, darker stones from Wales, somehow carried over impossible terrain. And finally, the great Sarsen circle, the trilithons, each crowned by a lintel fitted so precisely that even the modern eye can't help but marvel. But the question remains, why? What compelled them to build it here, in this lonely plain? Some say it was a temple of the sun, aligned with solstices, a great cosmic clock measuring the dance between light and dark. Others whisper that it was a place of healing, a prehistoric lords where the sick came to be cured by the energy of the stones. And still others imagine it as a place of burial, where ancestors slept in the embrace of sacred geometry. Yet none of these stories explain the silence, the way the air feels different inside the circle, the way the birds fall quiet when you step between the stones, as though you've crossed into something older than human time. When you stand in the center, every direction looks the same. The horizon stretches endlessly, grass rippling in waves. The stones rise around you like frozen sentinels, their tops touched by light, their bases shadowed in memory. You can almost sense them leaning inward, listening, holding their breath. For thousands of years, people have tried to read this language of stone. Druids, scholars, mystics, all searching for meaning. Even the Romans, when they marched through Britain, found it ancient beyond reckoning. They called it Chorea Gigantum, the dance of giants. In their minds, no mortal men could have raised such stones, but perhaps that was the point. Stonehenge was never meant to be understood, only to be felt. To remind whoever stood here that there is power in what we do not know. There's an old story, one rarely told now, about how the stones were alive once. That at night, when the moon was full and the mist lay low, they would whisper to each other. Long, slow syllables, words from before language. Farmers who wandered too close would swear they heard the murmur of voices, deep and distant, like the sea caught in rock. In the morning, they said, the stones would be wet, not from rain, but from the dew of their own breathing. Of course that's just a legend, but then again, all legends start with a truth someone once felt but couldn't explain. At dawn on the summer solstice, the sun rises exactly above the heel stone, a solitary sentinel that stands just outside the main circle. The light spills through the center and touches the altar stone within. Thousands still gather every year to watch it, to feel that same alignment of earth, sky, and stone. It's one of the few moments when time itself seems to loop, as if the first builders are still there, watching through our eyes. Archaeologists have unearthed cremated remains here, evidence that it may have once been a place of both death and ceremony. Nearby, the ancient settlement of Durrington Walls shows traces of feasting, animal bones, pottery, tools. People came from all over Britain, even beyond, to gather in the shadow of these stones. It was a pilgrimage, a meeting place between worlds, life and death, sun and shadow, known and unknown. And yet, even after centuries of excavation, no one has found the full truth. Every discovery only deepens the mystery. Why were some stones rearranged centuries later? Why did the builders eventually stop? Was the purpose fulfilled or forgotten? As night falls on the plain, the stones change again. The day's light fades from gold to blue to silver. The circle glows faintly under the moon, its outline sharp, timeless. A chill runs through the grass, and the sound of wind becomes something softer, slower, almost like breath. Standing there, you can imagine the world as it was before. No cities, no noise, only the pulse of earth beneath bare feet, and the cold touch of stone that has seen too much. If you listen long enough, you might think the stones are speaking, not in words, but in rhythm, the kind that seeps into your bones. They tell of rain and sun, and endless turning seasons. Of builders who dreamed not of empire, but of eternity. Of a circle that never slept because it didn't need to. It already belonged to time itself. They say that those who spend the night within Stonehenge never dream the same way again, that something in its geometry changes the way your mind sees the world. You wake before dawn, and for a moment, you forget who you are, caught between what was and what will be. And maybe that's the secret of Stonehenge. It isn't a riddle to solve, but a mirror, a place that reflects our longing to understand, to touch something that will outlast us. Each visitor brings their own question, and leaves carrying a silence that feels older than anything they knew. The circle that never slept endures, its shadow stretching across centuries, its meaning shifting like the light it captures. Perhaps it was built to mark the path of the sun, or the passage of souls. Perhaps it was never meant for us to know. But one truth remains certain. Somewhere beneath the soil, beneath the lichen and the centuries of wind, the stones remember. And when the mist returns to the plain, wrapping them in soft gray silence, it almost feels as though they are waiting again, for dawn, for footsteps, for the next curious soul who will stand beneath their watch and wonder. Because some places don't need to speak, they simply are, and in their silence, they teach us to listen. Nabta Playa. Far to the south of Egypt's great river, beyond the fertile banks and the whisper of reeds, the desert begins to breathe. The dunes stretch like sleeping waves, pale gold beneath a vast and merciless sky. There are no cities here, no temples of stone or marble, only the endless hush of sand and the quiet rhythm of wind. Yet hidden within this silence, beneath the weight of time and dust, lies one of humanity's first observatories. They call it Nabta Playa, a forgotten basin in the Nubian desert, where once, thousands of years ago, water shimmered in the heart of the Sahara. Long before the pyramids rose on the Nile, people gathered here beneath the stars to watch the heavens and measure their song. The circle that hears the stars. That's what the ancients might have called it if their words had survived. A ring of stones, humble in size but immense in meaning, standing quietly on a desolate plain that no longer knows rain. When the sun begins to fall and the air cools from white heat to bronze shadow, the stones begin to glow. They cast long, slender shapes across the sand, pointing toward secrets only the night can reveal. The horizon fades to indigo, and one by one the stars arrive, sharp, endless, unblinking, and as the Milky Way unfurls above the desert, like a pale river of light, Nabta Playa comes alive once more. Thousands of years ago, this place was not barren. It was a lake surrounded by grasslands. Herds of cattle grazed here. People built huts of reeds and clay, tending fires that flickered beneath skies so clear that every star felt close enough to touch. They looked upward, as humans always have, and began to see patterns in the sky, the slow, dependable march of constellations that marked the rhythm of the seasons. It began, perhaps, with a question: when will the rains return? When will the lake fill again? When will the world shift from thirst to abundance? And so they began to listen, not with their ears but with their eyes. They watched as the sun and stars changed their paths, and they marked these moments with stone. Slowly, deliberately, they placed each rock so that the circle would hear the sky. At its heart, Nabta Playa is simplicity itself. Small standing stones forming a circle, aligned with astonishing precision. But to those who understand its meaning, it is a whisper from the dawn of civilization. The alignment of these stones mirrors the rising of Orion's belt and the summer solstice sunrise. It is, in essence, a calendar of the cosmos, one of the world's earliest. Even in the dry stillness of the desert, you can feel the intelligence that shaped it, each placement deliberate, each shadow a message. As the night deepens, the air grows cool. The stars above feel eternal, yet they are moving, imperceptibly, year by year, in their slow celestial drift. The builders of Nabta Playa could not have known this, but they felt it. They saw that the world above was not chaos, but rhythm, that the heavens sang in cycles, and that life on earth followed the same song. It is humbling to imagine them here, wrapped in skins, seated around small fires at the lake's edge, watching the mirrored reflection of the stars ripple in the water, the smell of smoke, the crackle of reeds, the lowing of cattle nearby. Perhaps they told stories of gods who walked among the constellations, or ancestors who became stars after death. The desert today is silent, but it was once filled with these voices. The circle still stands, weathered, sun-bleached, half-buried. The sands have swallowed much, but not everything. The stones remain arranged with uncanny precision, aligned to celestial north, marking the moments when the sun and stars trade places across the year. When modern archaeologists first stumbled upon Nabta Playa in the 1970s, they expected to find traces of nomadic life, tools, pottery, maybe bones. What they found instead was geometry, purpose, a structure too precise to be accidental. And so began one of the quietest revolutions in our understanding of ancient thought. The people of Nabta Playa lived 6,000 years ago, long before the Egyptian pharaohs, long before writing, long before stone cities rose. And yet they tracked the heavens. They built a megalithic circle when the world was still learning to farm. Who were they? Their name is lost, their faces erased by wind. But their minds, their questions, their wonder, those endure. You can feel them in the arrangement of the stones, in the way each shadow falls when the sun touches its highest point. The desert night now is still, cold enough to bite the skin, yet strangely alive. The stars above feel sharper, more real than in any city sky. You can almost believe that the air itself remembers. There's something about Nabta Playa that feels older than civilization, older even than human memory, a quiet intelligence, a patience that predates language. The builders must have watched the sky night after night, generation after generation, until they could predict the seasons with the precision of instinct. And maybe, when they realized what they had done, that they could read the heavens, they marked that revelation in stone, not to worship, but to remember. It's possible that from this small, forgotten basin came the first whispers of cosmic order that would later shape Egyptian religion itself. The worship of Ra, the journey of the soul among the stars, the building of pyramids aligned to Orion. Perhaps it all began here, with this simple circle of stones in the desert. The wind shifts. Sand flows like water around your ankles. The stars above pulse faintly, their light trembling through the cool air. You realize, standing there, that you are surrounded not by ruin, but by knowledge. Ancient, silent, exact. Nabta Playa doesn't boast like the pyramids. It doesn't tower or glitter or speak in grandeur. It whispers. You have to lean close to hear it. But when you do, you begin to sense the enormity of what these people knew. They were listening to the sky itself. And somehow, the sky answered. The first civilizations didn't just emerge, they awoke. And here, in the circle that hears the stars, you can feel that awakening begin. When the first light touches the horizon, Nabta Playa changes once again. The air, cool from the long desert night, begins to shimmer with gold. Each standing stone casts its shadow like a sundial's hand, long and sharp against the sand. For a few brief moments, as the dawn stretches across the basin, the circle seems to awaken, the same way it might have 6,000 years ago, when the builders watched the sunrise of the solstice and marked it with reverence. This was their new year, their promise that the rains would return. The people of Nabta Playa understood that the heavens were not just a map, they were a message. The stars, the sun, and the shadows were the pulse of the world itself, a rhythm to which all life moved. The sun climbs higher, and the lake that once gave life here is gone, but it is easy to imagine the world that was. The people who came to this place brought their cattle, their children, their food. They built small shelters of brush and mud, and in the evenings they sat together by the fires, watching the stars arc across the same sky you see now. Their world was simple, but their understanding profound. Every year, the same constellations appeared in the same part of the sky. The stars of Orion rose in the east, heralding the season of water. To them, this was no coincidence. The sky was speaking, and they listened. The alignments at Nabta Playa were not random. The stone circle faces the sunrise at the summer solstice. The moment the sun begins to retreat from its highest climb, some stones align with the stars of Orion's belt, the same stars that later guided the builders of the pyramids at Giza. Long before pharaohs carved their names into stone, long before temples and hieroglyphs, people here in the desert had already mapped the heavens. They saw the same cosmic order that the Egyptians would later worship. Perhaps Nabta Playa was the seed, the first glimpse of the grand celestial architecture that would define an empire. There is evidence that the people here worshipped cattle. Bones of bulls have been found carefully buried in stone structures, sometimes placed in ceremonial pits lined with clay. To modern eyes this may seem strange, but to those who lived by the rhythm of rain and grass, cattle were more than food. They were life. Their blood, their milk, their breath tied humanity to survival. To revere the bull was to revere the heavens themselves, because the seasons that fed the herds came from above. It is here that scholars believe we see the earliest form of what would later become the Egyptian concept of cosmic balance, Ma'at, the harmony between sky, earth, and life. The same concept that would drive the building of pyramids aligned to the stars and temples that mirrored the heavens on earth. From these quiet people living by a once blue lake in the desert came the first whispers of sacred geometry, the understanding that the divine could be measured, mapped, and honored in stone. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear the murmur of a distant ceremony, the low hum of chanting voices, the rhythmic beat of hands against hollow drums, the crackle of fire. A procession moves toward the circle, carrying offerings, perhaps baskets of grain, or the skull of a sacred bull. The air is cool, perfumed with burning wood and crushed reeds. The leader steps forward, lifts his eyes toward the rising sun, and lays his hands upon the nearest stone. It is not worship as we know it, it is communication. The stones, the sky, and the people are one. Centuries passed, the rains failed, the lake dried, the herds moved north toward the Nile. The people followed, carrying their stories, their knowledge, their belief in the link between the heavens and the earth. They became the ancestors of the Egyptians, who would one day build pyramids aligned to Orion, temples to the sun, and tombs painted with stars. Nabta Playa was left behind, but its memory endured, buried beneath drifting dunes. The desert preserved it, as it preserves everything. When archaeologists uncovered the stones, they realized that the geometry was too precise to be accidental. The alignments predicted solstices, the angles mirrored celestial events, and the pits around it contained ritual objects. In its simplicity, Nabta Playa was a masterpiece of prehistoric thought. It told the story of how humanity learned to read the world, to translate the language of the sky into the order of civilization. Even now, as satellites trace orbits and telescopes reach into deep space, we are still doing what they did, listening to the stars. The people of Nabta Playa looked up and saw patterns. We look up and see galaxies. Yet the awe is the same. The difference is only in tools, not in wonder. The circle that hears the stars remains, small, silent, almost invisible on the endless plain. The wind hums softly between the stones, a sound like breathing. Perhaps it is the earth exhaling, remembering. You stand there as the night falls again, and the stars spill across the black sky. There is Orion, the same hunter they saw. There is Sirius, the same blazing star that signaled the Nile flood. And there, in the southern horizon, the faint line where the Milky Way rises, a mirror of the river of life below. It is said that all civilizations begin with observation. Someone, somewhere, looks at the world and sees order in chaos. At Nabta Playa, humanity took its first step toward understanding that order. The circle is more than stone, it is a conversation across 6,000 years. When you stand in its center, the stars above and the earth below seem to breathe together, as if the whole universe is a single living thing. The builders are gone, but their questions remain. What lies beyond the stars? Who watches from the dark? Why does the sun return? The answers are in the silence. The stones do not speak in words, they speak in shadow and alignment, in the balance of light and season. They tell us that the past was never truly primitive. It was thoughtful, mathematical, spiritual. Nabta Playa reminds us that even at the dawn of humanity, our ancestors were already philosophers of the cosmos. As dawn returns once more, the stones fade into pale gold, the sky brightens, and the stars vanish one by one. The desert returns to stillness. Yet something has changed, not in the sand, but in you. Because now, you have heard what the circle hears. You have seen what the ancients saw, that time is not just passing, it circles, endlessly, like the stars. And if you listen closely enough, you can still hear them whispering, a harmony between earth and sky, between past and forever. And so Nabta Playa endures, quiet, unbroken, eternal. The first observatory, the first question, the first answer, written not in ink, but in stone and starlight. The circle that hears the stars. Sungate. In the high, windswept plains of Bolivia, where the sky presses down like a silent blue weight and the air is thin enough to taste of metal, there stands a doorway that leads nowhere. It is not carved into a mountain or built into a temple wall. It rises alone, a single monolithic slab of stone, hewn with impossible precision, etched with symbols that glow softly beneath the touch of dawn. Locals call it Inti Punku, the Gate of the Sun. To those who live nearby, it is more than a ruin. It is a reminder that light itself once spoke to stone. At first glance, the sun gate is simple, a rectangle cut from a single block of andesite, nearly 10 feet tall and broad enough for two men to pass through side by side. But when the first morning rays strike its carvings, the wall seems to come alive, the figures shimmer, the shadows align, and the arch glows with a faint warmth that seems almost deliberate. For centuries, no one has truly understood why. Some say it was built as a calendar, a solar clock that once measured the turning of the seasons and the rituals of the gods. Others whisper that it was a threshold, a passage through which priests or spirits crossed between worlds. And others still, those who come in secret before sunrise, swear that when you stand in its center and close your eyes, you can hear something faint beyond the wind, like the echo of chants buried beneath stone. The first explorers who found the gate were confused. Tiwanaku itself, the ancient city that surrounds it, is older than the Inca, older even than most written histories of South America. Its builders left no written language, no record of their kings or gods, only stone upon stone, fit so tightly that even now, not a blade can slip between them. The gate was discovered shattered in two, perhaps by an earthquake, or perhaps by something else. Yet even broken, its craftsmanship is perfect. The central figure carved upon it is a mystery. Some believe it is Viracocha, the creator god, the one who brought forth the sun, moon, and stars from Lake Titicaca. His arms stretch outward, holding what appear to be rays of light, or bolts of lightning. Around him are 30 small faces, perhaps celestial symbols, perhaps something far more intricate. Some wear tears below their eyes, the weeping suns, as scholars call them. Why would a god weep when the dawn arrives? The alignments of the sun gate are just as strange. On the morning of the solstice, the first light of the sun passes directly through its portal, illuminating the center of the carving for a brief golden moment. But this alignment doesn't match the position of the sun today. It suggests that when it was built, thousands of years ago, the Earth's axis was tilted slightly differently, as if the gate records a sky that no longer exists. Beneath the site, archaeologists have found channels cut into the bedrock, narrow, deliberate grooves leading away from the plaza, toward the lake. They seem to have carried water, or perhaps liquid offerings. Imagine it. Priests in gold masks, standing before the gate as dawn breaks, pouring libations into channels that gleam like mirrors beneath the first light of the sun. Smoke curling from censers, drums low and distant, the wall ahead glowing as though it were alive. Tiwanaku was once a center of empire, a vast city of stone rising from barren land, sustained by genius engineering and belief. But no one knows how it began. It seems to appear suddenly in the archaeological record, complete, monumental, as though built by a people who had already mastered the art of civilization. Some of the blocks here weigh more than 100 tons. They were carved, transported, and placed with mathematical perfection. Yet no trees grow for miles, and there is no record of wheels or beasts of burden. The sun gate stands at the heart of this enigma, the crown of a city whose builders vanished. Its symbols might have been a calendar, a story, or a warning. Some researchers have suggested that the figures represent constellations, that the tears of the weeping suns mark an ancient celestial event, perhaps a comet, or an eclipse that terrified its witnesses. Others point out the gate's orientation toward the lake, suggesting it mirrored the heavens reflected on the water, a map of sky and earth united. But the legends that live among the people here are older still. They say that when the world was young, before the first dawn, the gods shaped the mountains and lakes by hand. When they finished, they stood before the dark horizon and struck the stone with fire. That stone, the one that melted beneath divine light, became the sun gate. Through it, the first sunrise entered the world. To this day, the villagers of Tiwanaku tell of strange occurrences. Travelers report hearing whispers in languages unknown. Cameras malfunction as the first light passes through the arch. Birds fall silent. Some even claim to have seen a shimmer in the air, a distortion like heat over stone, just as the rays strike the carved god's face. One researcher, writing in his journal in the 1970s, described something remarkable. On June 21st, during the winter solstice, he observed that as the light moved across the carvings, one particular figure, one of the weeping suns, caught the light in its eye, reflecting it in a perfect pinpoint toward the plaza floor. That spot, he discovered, marked the same alignment used by the Inca centuries later in their own temples to the sun. As though the builders of Tiwanaku had passed the code forward through time. And yet, the more that is uncovered, the more the mystery deepens. Beneath the dust and stones, there are layers of older foundations, entire platforms buried long before the visible city was built. Carbon dating shows that some of these are more than 10,000 years old, predating even known civilizations in the region. Could Tiwanaku have been built atop an even older world, one whose knowledge of the stars and the Earth's movement has been forgotten? When the evening comes and the wind carries the smell of ice from the mountains, the gate of the sun falls into shadow. The carvings fade, the warmth disappears, and the stone becomes just that. Cold, gray, silent. But for those who have seen it under dawn's light, it is impossible to shake the feeling that something ancient still stirs within it, that the wall remembers the fire that once melted its face, and that someday, when the heavens align once more, it might awaken again. The wind never truly stops at Tiwanaku. It hums through the grass like a song, half remembered, the same sound that may have swept across this plateau 10,000 years ago. When you stand before the gate of the sun at dawn, it is that sound, not the silence, that reminds you how long this place has been listening. The light moves slowly here, filtered through thin air, turning the world from indigo to gold, as though the sky itself were taking a breath, and in that slow breath, everything changes. The stone begins to catch the light again. Lines carved into its surface, so shallow they vanish under shadow, begin to stand out like threads of fire. The face of the god glows faintly. The long rows of tears seem to shift, as though the figures themselves were alive, moving through time instead of standing still within it. Ancient engineers, whoever they were, had placed the gate with impossible accuracy. The first rays of solstice light strike the same notch every year, within a fraction of a degree, as though the entire monument were built in conversation with the sun. This precision has baffled archaeologists for over a century. Even with modern instruments, aligning such a massive single-stone structure to celestial markers at this altitude would take weeks of measurement. How could the Tiwanaku people have achieved it with no written tools, no telescopes, no metal instruments to cut their stone? Perhaps the answer lies not in what they had, but in what they saw. Throughout the Andes, from Cusco to Puno, myths describe a people who read the sky like a scroll. Every star, every cloud of dust, every dark space between the constellations carried meaning. The Inca called these dark spaces Yanafuyu, the black constellations. They saw llamas, serpents and birds hidden not in the stars themselves but in the gaps between them. Tiwanaku, they say, was where the first watchers of these constellations were born, where sky and earth were once aligned perfectly. If that is true, then the sun gate was not merely a portal, it was an axis, a hinge between heaven and earth. Beneath the plaza where the gate stands, excavations have revealed something extraordinary. A network of buried corridors and chambers, laid out like veins beneath the surface. The stones used there are smoother than the surrounding walls, and some bear traces of a strange glaze, as if they were once exposed to extreme heat. This detail has led some researchers to propose an unsettling theory, that Tiwanaku's builders knew how to melt stone. It sounds impossible, yet the evidence grows harder to ignore. Along the edges of the sun gate itself, certain carvings appear partially fused, as though softened and rehardened, not chiseled, but reshaped. Some samples show vitrification, a glass-like surface consistent with intense directed heat. It gives rise to the legend that the gate was once struck by a weapon of the gods, a burst of light so powerful that it turned rock to liquid for a breath of time. Hence the name whispered in the villages, the wall that melted the light. Old Aymara storytellers speak of a sun that fell. They say that once, in an age before men, The sky split open and fire rained upon the highlands. The gods who lived among the stones tried to contain it. They built a door to hold the sun, not to let it through, but to keep it from escaping again. When they finished, they sealed it with their own breath. To them, the light that melts is not destruction, it is creation, the power that shaped the first dawn. What's strange is how this old myth mirrors what modern astrophysicists say about solar cycles and cosmic radiation. There are even fringe theories, not accepted by mainstream science but endlessly debated, suggesting that Tiwanaku recorded a solar event, perhaps a massive flare or coronal discharge, that scarred the Earth around 10,000 BCE. In this interpretation, the Sun Gate becomes both a warning and a memory, an ancient record of a day when light itself nearly burned the world clean. But Tiwanaku's mysteries go beyond astronomy. The city is built in a grid that subtly bends, aligning not just to the solstices but to the Milky Way. When viewed from above, with modern mapping tools, the layout of its temples and monoliths seems to trace a pattern that matches the dark constellations of the Andean sky. The Gate of the Sun marks the central point, the crossing where the celestial river meets the horizon. It's as though the entire city was designed as a mirror of the heavens, a living calendar made of stone and silence. For centuries, local farmers have unearthed small figurines near the site, tiny gold and stone carvings with the same image as the god on the gate. Each one carries minute details, rays, tears, wings, and eyes that seem to look in every direction. Some are found in pairs, one bright, one dark, the twin suns. These may have represented day and night, life and death, the seen and unseen worlds. Yet some researchers believe they were more than offerings. They may have been markers, portable fragments of a greater map, a language built of images, now lost. Standing before the gate at night, you can almost feel the weight of that lost language. The stars seem closer here, sharper, colder. You can hear your own heartbeat in the quiet. And if you wait long enough, you might notice that the shape of the Milky Way above matches the horizon of the mountains beyond, a perfect reflection. The builders of Tiwanaku saw this too. They must have. When the Spanish first reached these highlands in the 16th century, they found the ruins already ancient, already crumbling. The locals told them the city had been built by giants, the first people, made of stone themselves, who lived before the sun rose in the sky. When the light finally came, it turned them all to dust. Giants, or ancestors, or gods, no one knows. But scattered among the site are monoliths, so large they defy reason. Some of them bear the same patterns of tears and rays as the sun gate. Perhaps these were once the pillars that held the sky, marking the path of light before it entered the world. What haunts the modern mind most is not how such precision was achieved, but why. The gate seems to anticipate time, to remember alignments that would not occur again for thousands of years. One researcher calculated that the gate's carvings perfectly match the sunrise position from around 11,000 BCE, an age when Tiwanaku supposedly did not yet exist. How could the builders have known what the heavens looked like then, unless the gate itself was a relic from an even older epoch? In 2005, ground-penetrating radar surveys revealed another anomaly. Beneath the main plaza, nearly 20 feet down, lies a circular pattern of stones surrounding what appears to be an empty chamber. The formation aligns with the gate's central axis, suggesting it may have once been part of a processional route, a pathway that led through the doorway and into the underworld. Excavations are still limited, but one can't help but wonder, if the gate was meant to connect heaven and earth, could that chamber have represented the world below? Light above, darkness below, stone between, the triad of Tiwanaku. There is a theory, whispered even among archaeologists, that the Sun Gate may once have functioned as more than architecture, that it was part of a system of resonance. The sound frequencies in the plaza are peculiar. Certain tones echo back amplified, others vanish completely. It's been suggested that when chants or horns were played in precise rhythms, the gate itself would hum, not metaphorically, physically, like a tuning fork struck by light. Imagine it, dawn breaking, golden light spilling across the andesite, a chorus of voices rising in synchronization, their echoes vibrating through the gate until the whole structure thrummed with invisible energy. To those who witnessed it, it would not have felt like stone, it would have felt alive. Perhaps that's what the ancients meant by melting the light, not destroying it, but merging it, fusing sound, fire, and stone into one living ritual. Today the site stands quiet. Tourists take photos, wander among the fallen stones, unaware that beneath their feet lies the echo of a civilization that once sang to the sun. The gate endures, cracked but unbroken, watching the horizon as it has for millennia. And every year, at the solstice, the light still comes. It crosses the plain, touches the face of the god, and for one instant, one breath, the carvings seem to awaken. You can almost believe the stories are true, that the door once opened, that it could again. The wind passes, the light fades, and the wall that melted the light waits, as it always has for the dawn that will finish what the first sun began. Thank you for joining us on this quiet journey through the echoes of the ancient world. If you felt the pull of history tonight, remember to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. Every stone we've explored still hums with untold stories, waiting for those who listen closely. Until next time, rest well beneath the same stars that watched over our ancestors.